I spent 10 years of my youth with Nick, only to find out about his engagement on his 28th birthday. Nick told me, "Henry, you know the person by my side can't be a man." Late at night, I sat on the balcony, watching the distant flow of traffic thin out. I lit a cigarette, held it between my fingers, and took a drag. I still wasn't used to the taste of nicotine. I choked back a cough, my eyes welling up. I raised my hand, about to take a second drag, when I heard the lock turn. The next second, the cigarette was snatched from my fingers. "Since when did you pick up smoking?" Nick's brow was furrowed. I didn't answer. I just tilted my head back to look at him and said, "I was starting to think you weren't coming back again." A flash of guilt crossed his eyes. In a rare moment of explanation, he said, "It's been busy lately." Busy with what? I didn't ask about the scent of men's cologne on him that wasn't his. He didn't say, and I pretended not to know. Hasn't it always been this way? I stood up and gently wrapped my arms around him. I held his waist, buried my face in his chest, and stayed still. "You've been drinking." My voice was muffled. "A little, not much." "Do you want to?" I said. Nick didn't answer right away. After a moment of silence, he scooped me up in his arms and carried me a few steps before tossing me onto the bed. He leaned over me, his hot breath brushing against the hollow of my neck. Desire colored Nick's eyes, his breathing growing heavier. "Babe," I bit my lip to stifle a moan. When I heard that name, I threw my forearm over my eyes and felt the dampness seep through. When I woke up the next day, the space beside me was already cold. I went through my morning routine on my own, washing up, eating breakfast, and then left for work. A new manager had just been transferred to our department, supposedly from corporate headquarters. Word was he was a heavy hitter. To mark his new role, he took everyone out for dinner after work. He was younger than we'd all expected, with sharp, handsome features. And he was single. It didn't take long for a few of the women from the office to start hovering around him with their wine glasses. I kept to myself, eating my food. I didn't have any burning ambition to climb the corporate ladder, so I focused on the bowl of soup in front of me. "Henry?" I looked up and saw the manager smiling. "That's your name, right? I don't think I got it wrong." "That's right, sir," I answered. "You don't have to call me sir," the manager said with a laugh. "I hope you all know my name by now. This is Mark. We're all in the same department, so just call me Mark." I wasn't sure why Mark was singling me out, but it was a work dinner, so I raised my glass and toasted him. I hadn't planned on drinking tonight, but once you toast one person, you end up toasting others. Then the junior members of my team came over one by one to toast me. One thing led to another, and I ended up drunk. Mark had a driver. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I ended up getting a ride home from my new boss. Mark could hold his liquor. Despite being the center of attention all night, he was much more clear-headed than I was. He seemed a little surprised when he dropped me off at my building. I figured he was wondering how someone at my level could afford to live in such an expensive complex. If he asked, how would I explain it? "This is my boyfriend's place, my boyfriend is rich?" Or that I was a kept man, and this was my sugar daddy's apartment. Thinking about it, our relationship was probably closer to the latter these days. The only difference was that I had my own job and never asked Nick for money. But Mark had more class than to ask such a prying question. He just confirmed that I could make it upstairs safely on my own. I got back to the apartment. The place was empty except for the robot vacuum humming and zipping around on its program schedule. I took off my jacket, sat on the sofa, and started calling Nick. I tried again and again, but every call went straight to voicemail. The robot vacuum rolled over and bumped gently against my foot. I tossed my phone onto the sofa, leaned back, and said in a hoarse voice, "Get lost." The vacuum didn't listen, persistently bumping against my foot. "Today is my 30th birthday." After a moment, my phone rang with a call back. I snatched it up. "Nick, are you coming home tonight?" "Sorry, Nick just hopped in the shower." A bright, young male voice came from the other end, laced with childish provocation. My hand clenched around the phone. How many times had this happened? Why wasn't I numb yet? Why did it still hurt? I could hear Nick's voice faintly in the background, like he was in the bathroom. Who are you talking to? Someone called for you, Nick. I answered it. Who is it? Let me see. Some guy named. Before he could finish a sharp voice cut him off. Who told you to answer my phone? Give it to me. Oh, the guy's voice sounded wounded. I hadn't said a word the entire time, just sat there holding the phone. My eyes flushed red from the alcohol. Then, Nick's voice came on the line. Henry, what's up? I took a breath, hiding my emotions. Who was that just now? An employee. We're working late at the office. You're lying to me again, Nick. Okay, are you coming back tonight? I asked.
No, imbusi.
After hanging up, I felt exhausted. I barely washed up and, thanks to the alcohol, fell right into bed. I dreamed about 10 years ago today. I was the student council president, and my department took me out to celebrate my birthday. After dinner, we went for karaoke and stayed out until 1 in the morning. My head was spinning as I walked back to my rental. I found someone sitting on the steps outside my door, a cake box next to him. His long legs were awkwardly scrunched up, making him look especially pitiful in the dim hallway light. Hearing my footsteps, Nick looked up, his eyes full of hurt. Henry, I wanted to be the first person to wish you a happy birthday at midnight, but you weren't here and you didn't answer your phone. I was a junior that year with good grades and a great internship lined up from on-campus recruiting. I thought my life would just proceed smoothly, work, get married, and live an ordinary, stable life. But Nick, then just a freshman, had crashed into my life, pursuing me with a fierce, unapologetic passion. I'd never considered dating a man, and I always assumed it was just a game for a rich kid like him, so I kept turning him down. But that day, on a cold winter night, this boy who had lived a life of privilege and never known a day of hardship had crouched outside my apartment for who knows how long. The moment he saw me, there were no questions, no complaints, just, I wanted to be the first person to wish you a happy birthday. The fiery, stubborn light in his eyes. I admit, my heart skipped a beat. Waking up the next day, I replayed the dream in my head and stared blankly for a long time. My 30th birthday had just passed. No friends, no birthday song, no happy wishes, and no
Loa.
I was struck by what a failure my last 10 years had been. My 30-year-old self had less than my 20-year-old self did. When Nick and I first got together, he was only 18. He said I was his first love and demanded that I love him without holding anything back. His intense possessiveness pushed away everyone who came near me. Gradually, I lost all my friends. My parents passed away a long time ago, so eventually, the only person left in my life was Nick. I had nothing. That's why every time he betrayed our relationship, I could never bring myself to leave. I played dumb again, lying to myself. Get up, wash up, eat, go to work. The days passed. Nick would come home occasionally, and we'd have sex. When he was lost in the moment, he would call me babe. Whenever I heard that word, I'd bury my face in a pillow or my arm. One day, I was getting water in the company break room. Mark came over with his mug and stood next to me. I said hello. As Mark fiddled with the coffee machine, he casually mentioned he'd been to an engagement party the day before. He said, the groom is the heir to Sterling Holdings, the company in the office building next door. The kid is super low-key. Didn't invite a single media outlet, just some close friends and family. My hand trembled. Scalding hot water splashed onto the back of my hand, and my thermos clattered to the floor. Before I could even react, Mark grabbed my hand and shoved it under the running water of the sink. My eyes burned, and years of pent-up pain nearly burst out, but I barely managed to hold it back. We're going to the hospital, Mark said, grabbing my wrist and pulling me toward the door without another word. Wait, I said, my mind a mess. I need to request time off. I'm right here. Who are you requesting time off from? Mark sounded a little frantic. Mark drove me to the hospital himself, waited with me while they treated the burn, and then drove me back. He told me not to worry about work for the rest of the day and that he'd approve a day off for me. Sitting in the back seat, I thought to myself that this boss was being a little too nice. He dropped me off at the entrance to my building and asked if I was going to invite him up for a bit. I looked at the polite smile on his face and said, probably not a good idea. I live with someone, so it's not convenient. Girlfriend? Mark asked. Boyfriend, I replied. Mark raised an eyebrow, looking slightly surprised, but he didn't say anything more before he left. I didn't go inside. I turned around, hailed a cab, and went to a nearby gay bar. I'd never been to a place like this before, but I knew Nick had. I sat down at the bar, ordered a drink, and drank by myself. Before long, a slender, pretty young guy sat down next to me. You new here? Handsome? Haven't seen you around. I didn't say anything, just looked at him through narrowed eyes. Why are you drinking all alone? The kid's eyes were sultry as he slipped a business card into my shirt pocket. I'm here most nights. You can call me if you want some company. I pulled out the card and read it. Cody, that's me. Buying me a drink? So this was Nick's type. I looked at Cody's young face and wondered. Even though I'd never been here, I knew the deal. The guys at the bar sold drinks for a commission. I waved the bartender over, got a menu, and told Cody to pick what he wanted. Cody's eyes lit up, but he tastefully chose just 2 bottles. When the drinks came, Cody poured me a glass first. On you, handsome. Just as I reached for it, a hand shot out and snatched the glass away. Nick tilted his head back, downed the drink in one go, and then slammed the glass onto the floor. The brilliant, 16-sided crystal glass shattered into a million pieces. I lowered my eyes and silently looked at the mess on the floor. Nick grabbed the bottle from the table and poured another full glass. He shoved it toward Cody's mouth. You like to drink so much? Then drink. Cody's face was a mask of pure fear. Mr. Grant. He clearly had no idea how he'd offended the rich kid and shot me a desperate, pleading look. But that glance only enraged Nick more. What are you looking at him for? You think he's going to save you? Nick said, grabbing a handful of Cody's hair and yanking his head back. He forced the glass to the kid's lips and poured the liquor down his throat. Alcohol spilled from the corners of Cody's mouth. When the glass was empty, no one in the bar dared to intervene. When Nick reached for the bottle again, I put my hand on his. Then I took out my card and gave it to the bartender to run. Don't make a scene, I said, my voice flat. A scene? Nick's eyes were bloodshot as he repeated my word in a low growl. I ignored him, took my card back from the bartender, and walked out. Nick grabbed my arm. The sudden grip on my burned hand made me cry out in pain. Only then did Nick notice the bandage on my hand. He let go immediately. How did you get hurt? I ignored him and kept walking. The bar was in a quiet area, and since it was daytime, there was hardly anyone around. I stopped in a deserted alley and squinted, looking around. The sun was bright today, a rare perfect day. It filtered down through the leaves of the lush green trees, completely unchanged by the end of my 10-year relationship. How did you do that to your hand? Nick stood in front of me, reaching for it. I stepped back, avoiding his touch. Nick, we're done. Nick froze. He looked at me in disbelief, which quickly turned to fury. Henry, what the hell are you talking about? I looked him straight in the eye and calmly repeated. I said, you and me, we're done. You want to end it? After I find you in a place like this, messing around with that trash? I haven't even dealt with you yet. And you forgot what day it is, you bastard. Nick roared, his eyes wide with rage. How could I forget it was Nick's birthday? I looked at his furious face and almost wanted to laugh. After all these years, he was still just a kid. But what about me? Was there any trace of the person I used to be? Nick, you're getting married, aren't you? His expression changed instantly. He grew nervous and blurted out. You know? Was I not supposed to know? I said. Or did you think you could have a perfect marriage on one hand and a boyfriend on the side? Maybe I should ask, was I ever your boyfriend? Or have I just been some guy you keep on the side? Henry, how can you say that to me? Nick said, my marriage to Jessica is just for show, to keep our families happy. It's a business arrangement, don't you get that? Henry, you know that for someone in my position, the person by my side can't be a man. You didn't seem to mind that I was a man when you were chasing me, I said. My nose tingled, and a tear rolled down my cheek. Nick's face softened. He reached out to wipe my tear away. Henry, don't cry. I pushed his hand away and quickly wiped my own face. It doesn't matter what kind of marriage it is anymore. Let's just end it. Nick grabbed my wrist, his voice laced with panic. Don't say that, Henry. Let's go home. We can talk at home. Let go of me, Nick. I'll move out. If it's over, let's make a clean break. I twisted my wrist, but I couldn't break free. I didn't say it's over. Where would you even go? Nick ignored me, pulling me toward his car. Mr. Grant. A smooth voice called out, and Nick stopped. Mark was walking slowly toward us, a smile on his face. Mr. Grant, what a coincidence seeing you here, Mark said cheerfully. Nick forced a smile, clearly not wanting to talk. But Mark acted as if he couldn't read the room. I saw you yesterday, but it was too crowded to congratulate you and Miss White in person. My apologies. The deliberate mention of the sore subject made Nick's face darken. But Mark's next move completely infuriated him. Mark pulled me gently behind him. Since you have such happy news, Mr. Grant, I'll be taking my employee with me. Nick's eyes narrowed dangerously as he sized Mark up. He let out a sneer. What's with all the wannabes and random hookups today? When I'm talking to my man, when did it become okay for any riffraff to butt in? His words were incredibly nasty. Nick, I snapped. But Mark just kept smiling, as if he wasn't the one being called a side piece and riffraff. Is that so? I've never believed a person can be someone else's private property, so Mark paused. How could Henry ever be your man? Nick's eyes turned icy, and the air around us seemed to freeze. I knew him too well. I knew how dangerous that expression was. I reached out to push Mark. Mark, let's just go. You too, Mark said, not moving, just looking at me. Okay, let's go, quickly, I urged, pulling him. Henry. Nick's voice was filled with disbelief, as if he couldn't imagine that the person who had been so devoted to him, who had never left no matter what he did, would one day walk away from him with another man. I hesitated for a second, fighting the urge to look back at Nick's face. I pushed Mark forward again. A sharp pain twisted in my chest, but I let out a long breath. It's over. It's all over. I was in Mark's car again. The confrontation didn't seem to have affected Mark's mood at all. In fact, he looked pleased and even turned on the car stereo. Where are you headed? Mark asked, but before I could answer, he continued, if you don't have a place to stay, you can come to my place for now. I have 2 empty rooms, you can take your pick. I didn't say a word. Mark had already planned everything out in detail, presenting himself as a good Samaritan offering the best possible solution. I waited for him to list all the benefits of his place. Good lighting, no one to bother me, smart home features before I finally spoke. I don't want to impose. Just drop me off at any hotel, please. Mark was quiet for a moment. Then he chuckled. Henry, you're so refreshingly direct. 10 years was a long time. My chest was filled with a dull, persistent ache that stabbed at me with every movement. I really didn't have the energy to play games with anyone. Hearing his words, I couldn't help but smile a little. You mean I have no social skills, right? Mark glanced at me in the rearview mirror, still smiling. I didn't say that. You're great. You know how the world works, but you haven't let it make you cynical. I sighed, my smile fading as I looked out the window. But this thing I just ended is gonna hurt for a while. I'm not gonna be ready for anything else anytime soon. A crack finally appeared in the flawless smile that seemed permanently fixed on Mark's face. He quickly composed himself, and when he spoke, his tone was as nonchalant as ever. Fine, but you can't deny me the right to pursue you. Can you? I fell silent, watching the green landscape blur past the window, and didn't answer him. That night, lying in the hotel bed, I couldn't stop scenes from my past with Nick from flashing through my mind, one after another. I tried to force myself to think about something else, but it was no use. My phone buzzed twice. I picked it up. It was a text from Mark. A lot happened today. Get some rest. I'll pick you up for work tomorrow. I had just typed out "don't trouble yourself" when another text popped up. Be careful with your burn. Don't get it wet. I sighed, feeling utterly exhausted, and tossed the phone aside. The whole situation felt a bit ridiculous. I thought of myself as just an ordinary guy, yet I kept attracting the attention of other men, from a younger Nick when I was 20 to an older Mark now that I was 30. I went into the bathroom and looked in the mirror. The man looking back at me had a pale, tired face. At first glance, his features were decent, but a closer look revealed faint, almost invisible lines at the corners of his eyes. Do I look like some kind of femme fatale? I wondered, finding a dark sort of humor in it. I lowered my head and laughed at myself. Nick didn't contact me that night. I knew him. He was definitely angry, probably waiting for me to come back, apologize, and make things right. It had always been like that, hadn't it? He threw his tantrums, and as his temper grew, my standards lowered. But this time, he would be waiting for a long time. He was 28. It was time for him to grow up. The next day, as soon as I walked out of the hotel, I saw a car with its hazard lights flashing. Maybe it was my imagination, but the smile on Mark's face seemed even brighter than usual. He got out of the car and opened the passenger door for me before I could get into the back. I looked at him. He had a nonchalant smile on his face. Are you sure you want to sit in the back? Making your boss play chauffeur isn't a great look, is it? I was speechless. I ducked and got into the passenger seat. In the car, Mark asked me, "How did you sleep last night?" "Like a log," I said without hesitation. It wasn't true. I tossed and turned, and when I finally fell asleep in the early hours of the morning, it was a light, restless sleep. "That's great," Mark said with a smile. I, on the other hand, didn't sleep a wink. "Why's that?" I asked, playing along. "I'm happy. I think I might have a chance." The implication was obvious. I turned and looked at him, my face blank. He was focused on driving, his eyes on the road ahead. "Is your driver off today?" I asked, changing the subject. "Well, to be precise, I gave him the day off," Mark said, glancing at me with a mischievous look in his eye. "Because I was hoping that when we're together, our relationship could be more than just boss and employee." The conversation had circled right back. I frowned, about to shut him down, but then Mark added smoothly, "Being friends would be great, too." The whole speech I had prepared to reject him got stuck in my throat. I turned to look out the window. "Can I take you to dinner tonight?" Mark's tone was light. "We'll see." When we got to the office, Mark and I walked in one after the other. As soon as I entered, I saw a familiar figure sitting at my desk. The moment Nick saw me, he shot up and strode toward me. His face was dark, carrying the oppressive weight of a gathering storm. I held my breath. "Are you two living together?" Nick's eyes darted between me and Mark, his voice seething. He wasn't quiet. His words hit me like a thunderclap. In an instant, dozens of curious eyes were on us. At 30, I thought I had a pretty stable handle on my emotions. But now, being publicly accused of having an affair with my male boss by my ex-boyfriend, I was overwhelmed with shame. "Nick," I said, my face burning. I couldn't take it anymore. "This is an office. You're not an employee here. Please leave immediately. I go wherever the hell I want. Let's see who dares to stop me." Nick's eyes burned with rage, his voice rising. "I asked you, are you living with him?" "No." "What if we are?" Two voices answered at the same time. I looked at Mark in disbelief. Mark still had that bold smile on his face. "What if we are, Mr. Grant? You can't be that possessive, can you? Are you still trying to control your ex-boyfriend's private life?" "Ex-boyfriend?" Those words seemed to hit a nerve. Nick chewed on them for a moment before spitting them out coldly. "You're asking for it." A collective gasp went through the office as Nick suddenly swung his fist at Mark. The scene devolved into chaos. I tried to pull them apart, but it was useless. I just remember Nick snarling as his fist connected with Mark. "You dare touch what's mine? You've got a death wish." Someone called security, and the ugly spectacle finally came to an end. Things had gotten ugly. I couldn't stay at this company anymore. But I had been wanting to change my life anyway, so without much hesitation, I went back to the hotel and submitted my resignation electronically. Not long after I sent it, the doorbell rang. It was Mark. His face was bruised, but somehow he still managed to wear that smile that seemed permanently fixed to his face. "Ow, it hurts," he said, leaning against the doorframe. This time, his smile wasn't just polite, it had a hint of a playful pout. "Shouldn't you see a doctor?" I said, then added, "I can cover it." "Ah." I'd rather see you than a doctor, Mark joked. Looking at you puts me in a better mood so it doesn't hurt as much. I let him in, ordered some first aid supplies to be delivered, and handed them to him. Mark didn't take them, acting a bit like a spoiled child. My hand hurts too much. I can't hold anything. Maybe you should go to the hospital then. You do it for me. No matter how you looked at it, he got hurt because of me. Resigned, I picked up a cotton swab and started cleaning his wounds. This might sting a little. I dabbed the antiseptic on the cut on his lip, but Mark's expression didn't show a trace of pain. Instead, he seemed to be enjoying it, his eyes fixed on me. I found his intense gaze unsettling and looked away to avoid eye contact. Worth it, Mark said suddenly. What? I didn't catch his meaning. If getting hurt earns me your concern, then I think it was worth it, Mark said. I didn't know what to say. After a moment, I finally managed, I don't know what you see in me, but I'm not going to question it because that's your business. But what you said this morning, in front of everyone, those misleading words were completely inappropriate. Just as I finished speaking, the doorbell rang again. Then came Nick's voice. Henry, open up. I need to talk to you. Mark and I looked at each other. I motioned for him to be quiet. I walked to the door, put on the chain lock, then turned the handle and opened it a crack. Nick's face appeared in the gap. He was hurt too, but it looked less serious than Mark's injuries. His eyes fell on the chain lock, and his expression cracked. He looked deeply wounded. Has it really come to this? You have to protect yourself from me like this? He demanded. Your emotions are very unstable right now. This is better for both of us, I said, and it was the truth. Nick took a deep breath and, for once, didn't explode. Henry, I thought about it last night. If you don't like it, I won't go through with the wedding. We can just pretend it never happened. For Nick, this was a huge concession. I cut him off. Don't you get it? Whether you get married or not, we can't go back. Marriage is your decision. I hope you make it for yourself, and you don't need to tell me about it anymore. Maybe my words were too harsh, because Nick suddenly became frantic. Henry, what's wrong? Weren't we always fine? Why are you suddenly like this? I'm hurt. Don't you even care anymore? Henry, I looked at Nick's desolate expression and felt a pang of nostalgia. How many years had it been? How long since he'd called me by my name with that tone when he was sober? For a moment, the Nick in front of me overlapped with the boy from 10 years ago, the one who crouched by my door and said pitifully, Henry, I wanted to be the first person to wish you a happy birthday. I froze, my heart aching with a bittersweet sorrow that brought a flush to my eyes. Henry, if you don't put this on me soon, the medicine's going to dry out. Mark's voice suddenly called from inside the room. I heard it, and so did Nick outside the door. His face changed dramatically. The hurt look vanished, replaced by sheer disbelief. Mark is in there? You're putting medicine on him? We just broke up yesterday, and you're already this desperate? The harsh words hit my ears, and I finally realized he would never change. Nick was Nick. He was born to be selfish and self-centered, and nothing would ever change that. Thinking of my momentary weakness, I laughed at myself. I took a deep breath and said, whether I'm desperate or not is none of your business anymore. You should go. Felt like I used all my strength to say that. The last few words came out as a sigh, and I reached out and closed the door. I heard Nick's angry shouts from the other side. I stood there staring at the door for a moment, pushing down the bitterness in my heart. When I turned around, I met Mark's eyes. He had walked over at some point. The charming, all-purpose smile was gone from his face, replaced by concern. I'm sorry, Mark said. I looked at him, and after a long moment, I managed a smile and a shrug. You don't look okay, Mark said, taking 2 steps closer until he was standing right in front of me. Can I give you a hug? Just as a friend. I stood there stiffly, not saying anything. I'll take that as a yes. Mark reached out and gently pulled me into his arms. His embrace was light, perfectly measured, just like he said, a simple hug between friends. My chin rested on his shoulder. I could smell the scent of antiseptic and hear Mark's deep, magnetic voice right next to my ear. You can cry, you know. If I can be so lucky as to offer you a shoulder, For some reason, hearing his words, I actually did feel like crying. I squeezed my eyes shut, but a few tears escaped anyway. I tried to be quiet, but I couldn't stop my breathing from trembling. Mark heard it and gently patted my back a few times. I didn't let myself cry for long. After a minute or two, I pushed him away. "What's so funny?" Mark asked softly. He started to reach up to wipe away my tears, but I beat him to it. "I'm laughing at myself. A 30-year-old man, crying over a relationship. It's pathetic. Is 30 that old?" "Cry if you want to cry," Mark said dismissively. 3 days after I quit, Mark also left the company. He didn't resign, he was fired. "I got screwed over by your ex-boyfriend. Don't I deserve some compensation?" Mark had finally managed to get me out for dinner. He was spreading butter on a dinner roll, and when he was done, he naturally placed it on my plate. I knew Nick. He was a real piece of work, held a grudge, and had the power to make things happen. Getting rid of Mark would have been child's play for him. "What kind of compensation do you want?" I asked, my voice tinged with worry. "A kiss wouldn't be too much to ask, would it?" Mark said. I shot him a glare. "Be serious. What are you going to do now? With Nick's personality, it's going to be hard for you to find a job in this state." "So I won't look for a job," Mark said lightly. "My original plan was to work as in-house counsel for a few years and then open my own law firm. So this just moves the plan up a few years. It's not a bad thing. I've built up some contacts over the years, so it shouldn't be too rough. What do you say? Want to join me?" I stabbed at the roll on my plate with my fork, hesitating. "I'm not sure. I definitely trust your abilities, but investing is always a risk. I need to think about it. I should find a place to live first, get settled." "Sure, take all the time you need. Even if you don't want to be a partner, you can still be the first lawyer at my firm," Mark said. I agreed. Over the next few days, I was busy looking at apartments. I ended up buying a 1,300 square foot 2-bedroom. I'd saved up some money over the years, so I paid for it in full, no mortgage. Once I got busy, I thought about Nick less and less. I figured this was a positive cycle. I was no longer consumed with anxiety over a relationship, trapped in a spiral of negative emotions. Nick kept calling me every day for a while, but I didn't answer a single call. Then he switched to texting. He asked how my hand was and told me to rest. He suddenly remembered my non-existent 30th birthday and was filled with regret in his texts. But it was all too late. The bandage was off my hand, and it barely hurt anymore. I was already halfway through my 30th year. If his concern had come at the right time, it might have saved me. But since it came late, it was meaningless and worthless. And I never believed it was some kind of delayed deep love. After all, even if you don't care about something, if you've held it in your hand for a long time and are suddenly told it's no longer yours, anyone would feel a sense of loss, especially someone as possessive as Nick. I still didn't reply to his texts. After that, Nick disappeared from my life for a long time. I thought he had finally given up, but then one day, news that the heir of Sterling Holdings had called off his wedding started trending. I just glanced at it and quietly closed the app. At the same time, my law firm opened. I had decided to join Mark's venture after all. Being with Nick for so long had smoothed away my sharp edges. I had almost forgotten what an ambitious and driven person I used to be. Now, with my own career, my life was full, and I was finally starting to feel like my old self again. The firm was new, so we were short-staffed. Mark and I would often work on a case until late at night and then crash on the sofas in the office. When I woke up in the morning, I would always find his coat, smelling of his cologne, draped over me. Gradually, I got used to Mark's care, and our friends got used to seeing us show up everywhere as a pair. It felt natural when, on our way back to the office after winning a case, Mark kissed me on a quiet, tree-lined street. He gently wrapped an arm around my waist and gave me a long, tender kiss. It was a warm spring day. Golden sunlight filtered through the young green leaves, casting a happy glow on our coats. When the kiss ended, Mark slowly pulled back, a gentle smile on his face as he ruffled my hair. My face was flushed, and I was grateful that I still had the capacity to love someone. One day, Mark and I were hosting a dinner for some big names in the industry. In the middle of it, my phone started vibrating. I looked down and saw a number that I recognized instantly, even without a name attached to it. I discreetly silenced the call. But the person on the other end was persistent, calling again and again until everyone at the table started to notice. "Henry, what's wrong?" Mark asked. "I'm going to take this outside," I said, getting up with my phone while telling everyone to continue without me. At the end of the hall, I looked at the still ringing phone, took a deep breath, and answered. As soon as I did, I heard Nick's voice. "Henry." It was different from the confident, arrogant tone I was used to. Now his voice was hoarse and low, with a hint of cautious pleading. My heart tightened. The dull ache that had been dormant for so long started to spread through my chest again. After all, it wasn't just a month or two, it was 10 whole years. I didn't answer, waiting for him to speak. "Henry, how have you been?" "I've been good. Is there something you need?" I said, my voice cold. "No, I heard you opened a law firm with someone. Congratulations." "Thanks. If there's nothing else, I'm gonna hang up now." I stared at the tile floor, my voice devoid of emotion. "Wait, don't hang up," Nick said urgently. "Henry, I miss you. I miss you, Henry." I listened silently, my brow furrowed. Nick's voice trembled slightly. "Can we meet? Just once?" "Nick, I'm really busy right now. I have to go." "Wait, your stuff is still here." Nick seemed to be grasping at straws, desperately trying to keep me on the line. "I don't want it. You can throw it out." "No, that's too much trouble." A wave of exhaustion washed over me. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Then I'll have someone come pick it up." "No." "What is it now?" I said, exasperated. "I don't want strangers coming into the house," Nick said, sounding like a stubborn child. "What do you want?" My voice was tinged with anger. "Can you come get it yourself?" Nick said, his tone careful, like a dog begging for a treat. "I want to see you." How ridiculous. 10 years later, and our roles had suddenly reversed. I was silent for a long time, until he softly asked again. "Please? Tomorrow afternoon. I'll come get it and give you back the spare key." With that, I hung up. I stood in the hallway for a moment, clutching my phone, until a pair of strong arms gently wrapped around my shoulders. "What are you doing out here?" I asked. Mark seemed to have had a bit to drink. He gently nuzzled his chin against my cheek. "You were out here for so long. I was afraid you got lost." I have a terrible sense of direction. I can get lost in a mall after 2 turns. "How am I going to get lost making a phone call?" I said, amused. "Come on, let's go back. We're the hosts," and we both disappeared. I started pushing Mark back toward the private room. After a few steps, I said, "I have to go to my old place tomorrow to get my stuff." I was still a little nervous about it. But the next second, Mark gently took my hand, his voice light. "Okay, I'll take you." I smiled and squeezed his hand back. "Okay." Mark wasn't able to take me after all. A senior lawyer we had been trying to recruit for a long time came to visit, and I told him to go meet with them. When I got back to my old building, the security guard still recognized me and let me up without any questions. I knocked on the door. It opened after just one knock, and I was suddenly face to face with Nick. He had lost some weight, the line of his jaw was sharper. His hair was a little longer and unstyled, his bangs falling loosely over his eyebrows. There was a smile on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes, which were filled with more panic than anything else. His throat moved, and he managed to say, "Henry." I didn't say anything, just watched as his hand, hanging by his side, trembled nervously. It looked like he wanted to reach for me but didn't dare. "Can I come in?" I asked. Nick quickly stepped aside. "Yes, of course, come in." I walked inside and looked around. Everything was exactly as I had left it. Even the mug I always used was still sitting on the end table by the sofa where I used to read. My mom got back from Morocco yesterday. She brought back some really good coffee beans. "I can make you a cup," Nick said. "Don't bother. I'm just getting my things and leaving." "It's no bother. I'll grind it for you, add milk and sugar. Just how you like it," Nick said, selectively ignoring the second half of my sentence. I didn't argue with him. I went into the bedroom, pulled out 2 suitcases and started packing. I didn't actually have that much stuff. We used to share a closet, and only the left quarter of it was mine. I pulled out all my clothes and stuffed them into the suitcases. As I looked up, I noticed a suit hanging in the closet. It was a new white suit with intricate embroidery, clearly a wedding suit. I looked at it and thought it seemed a little small for Nick. He must have ordered the wrong size. But then I remembered he'd called off the wedding, so it didn't matter anyway. I turned around and saw that Nick had come up behind me. "Do you like it?" "What?" I blurted out. "I had it made for you, Henry." "I don't know." He seemed to choke on his words. I looked up at him in surprise. I heard him compose himself and continue, "I don't know how things got so out of hand at the hotel, but I was going to tell you that day. I wasn't going to marry Jessica. If you wanted, I was ready to have a huge wedding with you. Henry, if you just wanted." Nick's eyes grew moist, his voice cracking. In those puppy dog eyes, I saw a flicker of the boy from 10 years ago. We could never go back. "But I don't want to," I said, looking straight into Nick's eyes, watching the pain shatter in them. "Stop doing these meaningless things." With that, I grabbed the suitcases and headed for the door. Nick followed me. I heard a suspicious tremor in his voice from behind me. "How do you define meaning? What is meaning?" I got into the elevator, and Nick squeezed in with me. I was surprised to see a tear slide from the corner of his eye and land near his mouth. It was the first time I had ever seen such a lost, desperate expression on his face. He said, "Don't our 10 years together mean anything?" 10 years is a terrifyingly long time. Even now, seeing his tears, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. But it was because of those 10 years that I was so certain I would never compromise for him again. They meant something, but that was in the past. I sighed and reached out to wipe the tear from his face, just like I used to wipe the sweat from his forehead after he worked out. A flicker of hope appeared in Nick's eyes, but then he heard my voice. "Grow up, Nick. The person who helps you grow up just won't be me." Ding! The elevator doors opened. Without a moment's hesitation, I pulled my suitcases out. As soon as I stepped out, I saw Mark leaning against his car, a warm smile on his face as he watched me. "What are you doing here?" I said, smiling as I walked over. Mark took my suitcases and put them in the trunk. "I was worried you had a lot of stuff and would have trouble on your own, so I came over as soon as I was done." "Mr. Grant." Mark's gaze went past me to the person behind me. "Stop by our firm for a coffee sometime." I turned and saw that Nick had followed me out. His face was pale, and he was staring straight at me, completely ignoring Mark's taunt. The car started. I playfully smacked the back of Mark's head and said, "You're really something. I'm really crazy about you." Mark interrupted, leaning over to kiss the corner of my mouth. I pushed his head back. "Watch the road." In the rearview mirror, Nick's figure grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared. And ahead of us was a brilliant, magnificent sunset